Tales of Arise, the demo version on a low-spec PC. This is my newest PC. It's a Core i3. It's got 4 cores in it, or I think it has at least 4 threads. And it's got 8 GB of RAM in here. Whatever the internal, I forget what the GPU is called. I think it's like, what, 11360. I don't even remember what the kind of GPU it is. I'll add the specs to the bottom of this video. But it's a Core i3 with 4 cores. It's an 11th generation Intel CPU, and we're going to use the internal GPU to run this. We aren't using, I don't think we're using the XESS stuff. We are using the built-in graphics, the integrated graphics that are built into the CPU. I went to the display settings on this laptop and forced the resolution to 800 by 600. That gives me the advantage of playing this game in, quote, full screen mode, unquote. You can't set it to full screen because that changes the resolution to the widescreen. The lowest we can go is widescreen 720p, and that's too much for this game on this laptop. I did some testing before I started recording commentary, and I can confirm that you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to lock 30 frames a second if you have the resolution set to widescreen 720p on this laptop. But this is what, EVGA resolutions? With everything set to low, we should be fine. We can uglify this game a lot. We're not going to do that here. Like, we could go widescreen 720p and then set the resolution scale to 50 to make the game look like a pixelated mess. Playable, but barely parsable. So this is probably the lowest the game can go. Though thankfully, because I'm playing on a small screen, it's like a 15 inch. It's like I think it's like a 15-inch screen, 15 and a half most likely. I think we'll be fine. So I should be able to get 30 frames a second throughout this entire test run. This is just a mini test. We're not going to do any serious gameplay here. So when I play the game later, I'll bring out the serious gameplay. But for now, well, I have a couple of characters who shoot a lot of magic. So that's probably a decent test. I've already played a game as Rinwell, so I'll play as Dohalim for this one, who I messed with without recording commentary, so I'll see how he plays here. Like I said, the good news is that this game is playable on a laptop. In fact, I think on a Steam Deck you might be okay. You might be able to lock the frame rate to 30 on the Steam Deck. I forget how it works. 40 might not be doable because again, I'm playing at 800 by 600. So maybe it'll look fine on a Steam Deck. Maybe if we want to add some black borders, because that's what's going on here. I want to say this game forces a widescreen aspect ratio. So even though the monitor is set at 800 by 600, there is that problem of there is that problem of having to put the black borders around everything. So it's almost like they're doing a widescreen. It's almost like they're doing a DVD resolution. Yeah, it's like it's 854 by 480 is what this looks like. It might even be lower. I'm capturing at 768p on my quad-core Celeron Windows 10 Education laptop, so I can do a full 60 FPS capture and see what frames are getting dropped when. You can see on the top left-hand corner of the screen, you can see the frame rate counter that Steam is overlaying. So again, we're not gonna get 60. We're not gonna get 60. We're gonna hover around the high 30s to the low 40s during combat. But from what I've experienced, it seems perfectly playable. I'd rather play at 60, but in fact, I have a desktop. I can play at 60 frames a second on my desktop, 1440p easily. I can even crank up the settings if I want. But if I'm playing on a laptop on a smaller screen, this might be perfectly acceptable. Like the visual the lack of smooth scrolling isn't as much of a problem on a screen this small because the pixels are so tiny. So I would argue that improper frame pacing is less of an issue on a tiny screen like this, a 15-incher, than it would be if I were playing on my 50-inch right behind me. The big 4K TV and 50 inches makes 50 inches wide makes everything look terrible. It doesn't look terrible. It's just noticeable. If I play on a smaller screen, I think I'll be fine. In fact, I might do that later. But for this combat, we're going to see how responsive the controls feel with this frame rate going crazy. I think we'll be fine. Let's see. There's a bit of hitching there, as you saw, but I'm okay, all things considered. That was the X button attack. It's the Y button attack. Playing on the Xbox 360 controller. That's the B button attack, which I believe is a launcher. And look at that. They got air juggles. That is awesome. And we got a strike coming on. Strike! Obelisk Blade. Alright, we got a couple more dudes left. What are my other options here? B, so we got the launcher with a couple of somersaults. And we're missing the dude entirely. So we can get on the ground eventually. So let's get on the ground. Strike. Catapult to the Obelisk Blade, and we are 2 down. Okay, we good? Yeah, they got him in the air. Strike. Another catapult to an Obelisk Blade. So frame rates, I think, got above 60 that one. So yeah, the best it will do is 60, but it's most likely going to drop into the mid 30s. But yeah, it's still playable, so that's good. And again, on a smaller screen, the game's still doable. So I'm curious if this is a Xbox One game, so I'm curious if this game will run on a Switch too. And I would not be shocked if they tried to get a few more, if they tried to re-release a bunch of Tales games, because I think these games sold like about 1 million or so copies in Japan, at least on the other consoles. But I don't think it ever came out on the Switch. If it did, you might struggle to get 640p docked, I would argue, based on this laptop's performance. But this laptop plays Control at 30 frames a second. I want to say I can lock the frame rate to 30. But yeah, I've been meaning to make Control videos. I'll get around to doing that later. But this was a game I wanted to see because this was supposed to be a real test of the laptop. So Control runs. This runs. I got a couple of low spec games I'm going to pull out later. A couple of other demos. They will run. You Suck at Parking runs. Forspoken will definitely not run. I doubt it will even load. That game requires 16 gigabytes of RAM. I was running it on a desktop with 12 gigabytes of RAM, but let's be honest here. I'm not going to be able to run it on a laptop with 8. So that's completely out of the realm of possibility as far as I'm concerned. I'm not that bent out of shape about Forspoken, but I can run it on my desktop, so that's what matters to me at this point. It was all part of a test anyway. I don't think I have any AoE attacks. I think Brother Man here, Dolan with the bow, can only attack one enemy at a time, except for a couple of attacks that might, like when he throws that bow, he might be able to attack multiple enemies in a line. But some characters are much better at handling groups. Strike. So yeah, these controls are reasonably responsive on this laptop, so I'm impressed. I can see the input. By the way, I'm looking at the lag on my recording laptop because I'm capturing this on a Vivitar USB dongle. So yeah, it's input latent. So it's somewhat low latency. Like I said, I'm able to play Super Nintendo and Genesis games on my laptop using that thing. So it's not terrible. Though I should probably test out my what do you call it? I should probably test out my Vivitar. It's not the Vivitar. It's the J5 Create, which should have lower input latency still. I can test that out another time. Well, that, and I'm also running this game on 2 laptops, because obviously I'm running it on this laptop that's just duplicating the image through the HDMI output. So that's yeah. See that interference on the bridge? Those weird semicircle looking things in the distance? Yeah, that's just visual noise you would expect at because we don't have the interlacing on. No, excuse me, we don't have the aliasing on. I could try turning it on, but I'm curious my frame rate's going to dip. So here's what we're going to do. For this section of the game, we'll walk around for a couple of seconds, then we'll turn on the interlacing, see how things hold up. Because we're loading a new area, so things will be somewhat slow here. The frame rate's going to dip here, but it'll probably come back up once everything's loaded. It might be like a one-time thing where the first time you enter an area, the frame rate's in the 20s. But then once everything's loaded and once the combat starts, you should be in the 30s, which is what you want for a game. You want the frame rate to be as high as possible when combat starts. But if the frame rates are lower here in the field, yeah, this is not great. But if the frame rates are lower here in the field, but they're above 30 in combat, then we're good. So we're probably not going to be able to turn on the anti-aliasing. Because the only anti-aliasing we have here is like temporal, TAA, the temporal anti-aliasing, which will smooth out some of these rough edges, but it'll cost us some performance, which is not great here in these larger field exploration areas. Like you can see the draw distance is really far, and the frame rate's dipping. So that's unfortunate. We're capturing at 60, but at some point we'll probably have to get into a fight and see how low it'll go. But I guess, but once we get into a fight, it's in a contained area, so we shouldn't have to worry as much about the frame rates dipping. I do have to play Star Ocean on this thing. The remix. Yeah, the remake should work. How are we on health? Let's do a recovery. 80%, so I'll mostly heal everyone. So that one followed me. But we can roam around a bit. Do I have an AoE attack? Yeah, the Y button is an AoE attack on multiple enemies in a line, it looks like. Yeah, the Y button. Not very strong though. That's not a weakness attack. X. I think he hit me. B. That's a launcher. And we can juggle him in midair, which is always nice. We got a strike to finish him off with an obelisk blade. All right, so a couple of guys are almost dead. Jump. Yeah, okay, so the X, when you're in midair, the X button gets you on the ground with a ground pound. The Y button looks like it's a air juggle. So I'm gonna have to practice that. Sonic Spear. And there's your strike. Obelisk Blade. So I think she's just a shield basher who can just whip out a blade as a super attack, which is kind of hilarious. It works. So I think the frame rate during the combat was okay. Again, it didn't feel unreasonably sluggish. So that's good to know. So yeah, we're really testing the limits of what this laptop is capable of doing. Again, 800 by 600, that's really pushing it. But again, integrated GPU is gonna integrate. So I'm still surprised that's enough to run Control as well as it does. So I'll do a whole separate video just for that. But this low spec test went surprisingly well. It went well enough. I'll just put it that way. Because during combat, the performance is good enough, and that's what I think the really important thing. Give me the loot. I got beef. These are cookie ingredients. Eh, so we can do that. So we're probably getting to one more fight. I already fought the shells, so who else can I fight? Yeah, this rock with a couple of floaters. We should be fine. We can fight the giant rock with some floaters. So we'll fight the big dude first. Was it LB to switch characters, Y button to throw the bow. Ready to dodge, of course. Targeting the wrong guy. He's on the ground. And left bumper for a regular attack. Or right bumper for a regular attack. Be ready to dodge. I don't know if he fell, if he just tried to do a smash on us. Strike. Okay, the big dude's going down, so we can take out the small floaters. Okay, how we doing? Oh, we got them all. Okay, never mind. I suppose swords have their uses. She says knowingly. So yeah, so the frame rate during the combat should be fine actually. Only one roper, got a straggler, so we got him. Can we juggle him? Strike. It's going down with the obelisk blade. So I guess once that strike meter appears, I'm always gonna throw in the obelisk blade with my partner there, which is cool enough. It's just me, or does the game look smoother on the capture PC than on this PC that I'm playing on? I might be doing some kind of, because I upscaled it to 768p, so it's capturing at 768p, so I get all 60 frames a second when I eventually put it on YouTube. They're going to compress it down to 720p, obviously, so we'll see how it goes. But I don't have the option of doing I can't do a 720p 4:3 capture. But I can definitely capture at 768p, then just kind of crush it so it goes down to 720, which is fine for my purposes. Because again, YouTube gives you 720. So unfortunately, we can't. Yeah, so we were in the 20s earlier. It depends on how far in the distance we're looking, I suppose. Yeah, see, it's back up to 30 now. When we look off in the distance where the castle is, it dips to the 20s. So yeah, whatever it's doing to render all that geometry all the way in the distance over to the castle is not helping. But yeah, this is a frame. So I'd say the laptop passed the frame rate, the low spec frame rate check. But yeah, this is the most powerful laptop I got. So no, there is not much hope for on a less capable laptop, unfortunately, or any other integrated solution. Maybe a good AMD will run it well. I don't know. But yeah, it's not looking good. Good enough, but not great. Again, for a demo, this is a like, there are also older JRPGs. Like your what is it? Like your dot hacks. That runs at 60 on budget laptops these days. You can lower the res. It's a PlayStation 2 game, so you can obviously run it at like 480p and it'll still look fine because it's made to be viewed at that resolution. But you can crank up the visuals if you want, especially on a laptop that's this new. Because yeah, this laptop was on clearance, like a $220. It was like a $200 laptop. So you won't see many $200 laptops of this that are this powerful in this price range. These laptops tend to cost 300. But this is a pretty this seems like a surprisingly well-made unit. It was just on clearance. It was a 350, $400 laptop that was on clearance, so I had to snap it up given the specs. And like I said, it plays Control. I'm never going to stop being blown away by that. But yeah, it basically boils down to, can I finally play Just Cause 2 and Saints Row 4 on this thing? Most likely. I'm never going to be able to play Just Cause 3. But the dream was to play like a Just Cause 2 or a Saints Row 3, something that's. Or Kings of Amalur runs on it, obviously. Because it runs on far less powerful laptops. Alright, so we get the idea. So yeah, the game's performance is reasonable during combat. It's when you're roaming around there might be some problems. It's really choppy. But again, on a smaller screen, you might be fine. And in my case, if I were to play this on a lower spec desktop hooked up to a smaller screen, like say a 19-incher, I got a 19-inch Samsung over here. I think at 720p I have a desktop, it would look perfectly fine on a smaller screen. So I'll probably test it out. So I can hook up this. Yes, what I can do is I can hook up this desktop behind me to my Samsung. Just kind of get a feel for how the game looks on a smaller screen with a lower resolution. I got an Insignia, but that's 1080p. So I'm curious how that'll work. But I recorded this on my Plantronics headset, The laptop that I used for the playing was a Windows 10. Was it Windows 11 or Windows 10? It's a Windows laptop. I'll get the specs later, but it's a 11th generation Intel GPU on this thing. It's a quad core i3. It's at least 2.8 gigs. I'll check the speed on that. 8 gigs of RAM on this thing. I'll double check the speed on that as well. It should be at least 1600. I think it's DDR4. And it's when I did a video about the Ghost Runner demo. That game somehow ran on this laptop too. That's a FPS. Ran at 30 at least. I think I got close to 60 if I pushed it. If I like really uglified the game. And our output of this via HDMI output, I duplicated the HDMI output to my quad-core Windows 10 education laptop, which is a quad-core Celeron. And I'm capturing this at 60 frames a second at 1024 by 768p so that I can maintain the 60 frames per second capture so we can see all the frames that got dropped. Or at least we can see the persistence of the frames because I couldn't lock it to a solid frame rate. So it'll dip up and down between 20 and 40 outside of combat. And it'll dip between 30, what is it, like 35 and 40 during combat. We'll see how that goes. The footage is here. The counter is here if you want to compare it to what the counter says. But yeah, this game, as an action RPG, it seems really interesting. I would not play it on a laptop if I could help it, but if all of you have is a laptop, it's a newer laptop. This game runs during combat at a playable frame rate. As ugly as the game looks, it's still playable. The controls are very responsive, so that's good. If you can play, again, I'm able to play this game. You might be able to play. You should be able to play Control if you can get your hands on it. This laptop also plays a couple of other games I need to test, like full 3D games I got to test. So we'll get to that later. But yeah, all my old games that ran on my quad core AMD APU are gonna run on this thing. I'm fairly certain. So we'll do a couple more. We'll do a couple of different games in a second. But this was just a test run on the low spec laptop. So it's sort of a high. It's a how I say this. It's a high spec low spec laptop, but it'll do the job. So that's good to know.